everybody go through the kitchen and get your weapons.
Let's go. Come on, hurry up.
Deep in rural Texas, Paul Range and his family are preparing for a cataclysmic event.
Go, 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 go. Let's go. Let's look out. Come on,
They
go.
don't know how it will happen.
Come on, go, go, go.
Come on, go.
Okay, guys, as quick as possible. We got to get out of here.
Or when exactly it will hit.
All the way back door. We need a gunner.
But they feel that it's near.
Everybody secure? Let's go.
And there may be no way to stop it.
There are so many events, and we're coming to the peak on so many things. There's going to be some type of doomsday event.
A lot of people think something is fixing to happen, and it's fixing to happen fast.
We've got a house of cards. At any time, one of those cards could fail, and everything's going to topple.
I think that you ought to have a plan to save yourself.
This family are getting ready for what they believe will be the darkest time in human history. But they are not the only ones who sense doom and damnation on the horizon.
Some people wonder whether, is there any way that humanity can turn around so that they can stop the apocalypse? I don't think that's possible.
Some people believe that signs of doom have been foretold in prophecy since the beginning of time.
We're already dealing with some of the crises and so many of the dark prophecies that we've been led to believe we could expect in the near term.
One of the most famed prophets of doom is a 16th century French astrologer by the name of Michel de Nostradame, known as Nostradamus.
When we hear the word prophet, one of the first names that comes to many people is the prophet Nostradamus, who has gained tremendous popularity and visibility in our time, perhaps even more than he had in his own day.
John Hogue has been studying Nostradamus and his collection of prophecies for 30 years.
Nostradamus is the quintessential Renaissance man. We know him for his prophecies, but he was an astrologer, he was a physician, he was a pharmacist.
But Nostradamus' life was to take a dark turn.
Nostradamus was marked and scarred by tragedy. In 1538, his family died of the plague, his 2 children and his wife, from a plague he couldn't cure. Life experiences of a prophet will color how they interpret what they see. I think the death of his family did to him what has been done to a lot of people who follow a mystical path. It shattered their dreams, their illusions about life. They have an existential crisis. I think that this actually gave birth, out of tragedy, of his prophetic gifts.
After the death of his family, Nostradamus begins writing his famous prophecies.
Nostradamus planned to write a history of the future in 10 volumes called Centuries.
He wrote his prophecies in terms of symbols and analogy in very mysterious phrasing called quatrains.
What Nostradamus did was channel spirits. He would go up into a secret study, and then he would mount a bowl of boiling waters. Perhaps some narcotic herbs were also added. He came into the ecstatic trance state He described what he saw as shadowy images of the future. It was almost like he came into a continuum where the whole future, past, present, and future, was there before him. Nostradamus is probably the most pessimistic prophet I've ever encountered. He saw so many terrible things in the future coming.
Believers say he predicted events far into the future, including the rise of one of the worst villains in all human history.
A captain of Greater Germany will come to deliver a false help. King of kings to support Hungary. His war will cause great shedding of blood.
This is about Hitler. He is the captain of Greater Germany. That was the official name of Hitler's empire. It was Großdeutschland, Greater Germany. He was a king of kings. He made himself out to be a messiah of the Aryan race. Hitler in this prophecy is described as Hister. He shows up 5 times in the prophecies as this Hister.
But there are other ways one can interpret the term Hister.
The word Hister was actually Latin for the lower Danube River, and it's quite clear from the context of the quatrain that that is what is being referred to. It's not referring to a person at all, it's referring to a geographical area.
Skeptics doubt that Nostradamus had any real prophetic ability.
Any of these quatrains can be interpreted in any way you want to fit any event you want. He was a master at formulating prophecies because he ensured by wording them so vaguely that they probably outlived their expected lifespan, but they have no truth value whatsoever.
But believers argue that Nostradamus predicted certain details of the future that no man living in the 16th century could have possibly imagined.
Near the harbor and in 2 cities will occur 2 scourges the like of which have never been seen. Hunger, plague within, people thrown out by the sword will cry for help from the immortal God.
Those particular lines, people have interpreted as being some kind of reference to the bombing of Japan.
There will occur 2 scourges, the like of which have never been seen.
It could mean these 2 harbors were bombed by a new kind of weapon never before seen. If Nostradamus was actually seeing Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he would wonder what kind of barbarity is mankind becoming.
But skeptics argue that linking this quatrain to Hiroshima is tenuous at best.
When you actually look at the next line, it makes clear references to famine within plague. The only way that you can come up with that interpretation is by cherry-picking the lines that seem to fit the interpretation you want to give it and ignoring the other lines that don't fit.
Back in rural Texas, Doomsday prepper Paul Range fears that a nuclear attack is a real possibility.
Everybody thinks about the nuclear problem. I worry about a country who has just a couple of nukes, throwing them at another country, and then things escalating. Of course, at all times, you know, we'll have a guard at each corner of the building. You have to be prepared for any eventuality. We have the basics, we have the water, we have the food, and we have the shelter. I'm fully capable of living off the land. It's not as good as existence, but, you know, you are alive.
Paul Range and his family are part of a growing number of people who call themselves Doomsday Preppers.
The term Doomsday Prepper connotates people like us who have an incredible amount of food stored up and are prepared to use it and defend our families.
To the point where you're ready for everything, including a doomsday.
Some Doomsday Preppers believe certain cataclysmic events have already been foretold by prophets like Nostradamus.
Nostradamus did some incredible predictions that actually came true.
Many Nostradamus believers claim that he predicted one of the darkest days of the 21st century.
The sky will burn at 45 degrees. Fire approaches the great new city. Immediately, a huge scattered flame leaps up when they want to have proof of the Normans.
This quatrain became the terrorist attack on New York City on September 11, 2001. The great new city has to be a city that hadn't been created in Nostradamus' time. A new, great new city with half the name in it, New York. From 45 degrees comes the fire, a huge scattered flame. And if you look at the North Tower, look closely to the imprint of the jet. It is at 45 degrees.
But skeptics say this quatrain has nothing to do with the September 11th terrorist attacks.
People who are now looking for prophecies that supposedly apply to the 21st century fail to understand that would not have been his concern. What was the biggest existential threat to the people of Europe at the time? The Ottoman Empire, which right before Nostradamus was writing this book, had acquired large sections of what we call the Balkans nowadays. Where would 45 degrees latitude be? It would be in the area of the northern Balkans. I think more likely he was talking about some attack by the Ottoman Turks on an area in the Balkans. There's no reason to interpret that as referring to New York City, in other words.
But believers claim that other prophecies support this interpretation of the 9/11 attacks. In another quatrain, Nostradamus describes an evil being called Marbus, whose death will trigger great upheaval around the world.
Marbus will soon die, and there will come a dreadful destruction of people and animals. Suddenly, vengeance will appear, 100 hands, thirst and hunger, when the comet passes.
Nostradamus believers say Marbus was the code name for the third and final Antichrist.
Nostradamus is unique in prophetic traditions. He's the only one I've ever uncovered that doesn't see